All right, folks. So, deloads. This is a question that I get asked a lot, and this is something that throughout my career as a coach and sort of my experience as an athlete, that my thoughts have changed on quite a lot. So, I'm going to run you through maybe the approach to deloads that I take now, and I'll sort of show you how my thinking's changed, right? So, when it comes to deloads now, what I tend to do is use like an auto-regulator approach. So, like an approach where I track various metrics week on week, and then I'll add the deload in where we feel it's necessary for my athletes, right? So that means that some athletes might end up doing 4 weeks of like hard training and then deload for a week. For others, that might be 6 weeks of hard training. For some athletes, that might only be 3 weeks of hard training followed by a deload week. So that's going to vary. Like the mesocycle length now that I use for my athletes will vary based on sort of physical performance metrics. So if they get to a point where fatigue starts to build up too fast, or maybe performance is plateauing or starting to decline, then that's going to be a strong indicator that they need a deload at that time. So that's more the approach that I tend to use now. So it varies per athlete and it's auto-regulated. If I think in the past about what I did, is I would often do like a structured deload. Like, I'd just say, okay, you're going to work for 4 weeks and then have 1 week with pure rest, and then 4 and then 1. So I think over time I moved towards this more auto-regulated kind of approach, specifically because it gives athletes a little bit of a chance to listen to their own body. Like rather than if you set like a specific, okay, I'm going to work for 4 weeks and then have 1 week rest. The issue with that is it doesn't cater for that individual variation, right? So you might have some lifters that could easily push for 6 weeks and you're artificially cutting them short, which just seems counterintuitive, right? If they could keep on training harder and making progress, why are we cutting them short like when they don't need to? On the other end of that, you might have some athletes that by the end of week 3, they're just getting burnt out, and I've seen this. I've got athletes like this that they can do 3 weeks of really hard training, and then week 4 is just an absolute mess. And this tends to be your bigger, your more explosive, honestly, you're really like fast twitch, if you want to call it, kind of athletes that just get super, super fried. I don't think it's any surprise that when you look at like the training cycles of some of the best weightlifters in the world, that they actually tend to be 2 to 3 weeks followed by like a 1 week kind of back off period. And that's because when you think about like weightlifters, Olympic weightlifters, they're all naturally probably some of the most fast twitch, explosive athletes on the planet. So they need those shorter kind of accumulation blocks and they need more frequent deloads. But if you're someone that's maybe a bit smaller, someone that's not naturally as explosive, if you can keep on pushing for multiple weeks, then you should absolutely do that. So I think for me, that's the difference in my thinking about deloads. Now, if I had to sum up like what a deload should look like, it comes down to what we're trying to accomplish with a deload, right? So a lot of people don't deload enough. They don't actually take away enough stress and enough work or enough volume to actually reduce fatigue. The purpose of your deload is to reduce fatigue, is to allow your body to recover. You're not going to make any adaptations in the deload week, right? So in that week, what I tend to do is I will give all my athletes half of their normal sets. So if they're doing 4 sets of an exercise, they're now doing 2. If a workout had 20 sets, that workout now has 10 sets. Alongside that, their intensity, if they were working at something like a RIR2, like 2 reps in reserve, now they're going to be at 4 RIR, 4 reps in reserve. We're making things deliberately easier. So we're reducing the sets and we're reducing the volume. So sets are going down, intensity is going down, everything's moving down to make that training a lot easier. If my athletes are really beaten up, what I'll actually sometimes prescribe is like an active rest week where we won't even do the regular kind of exercises. I'll just tell them to maybe go cycling, swimming, go in the gym and do a couple of like circuit style sessions a couple of times. So that's kind of like, that's the deload kind of approach, the active rest or the active recovery. I tend to use that right at the back end of a program. So when someone's just finished like a big peaking block, or they've just done like, a bunch of 1 rep maxes or some really hard training or testing, then I tend to add in an active recovery block. But that's deloads and active recovery in a nutshell, right? So if you are deloading, it needs to be an actual recovery. You need to see the sets coming down. You need to see the intensity coming down. If you work in percentages rather than reps in reserve, then let's say you were doing most of your training at 80 to 90%. So you're doing loads of snatches and clean and jerks or squats at 80 to 90% 1RM, right? Well, in deload, that should come down to like 60 to 70%. Okay, so we're talking about a 20 to 30% drop across everything, across all intensities. So it should be a big drop. This training week should feel so easy. Your workouts, you should be in and out 30 minutes done. You might even be able to, if you're training 5 times a week, you might find that you can come in, drop it down to 3 times a week, just combine a few sessions, and still there should only be 40, maybe 45 minutes. So it should be a week of really easy training, just enough to keep muscle sort of hanging around, to keep strength hanging around, to keep that technique feeling roughly sharp. That's it. That's all we're doing in the deload week. So I hope that sort of roughly explains my thinking, how I structure deloads, and sort of what the actual week itself should look like. Any questions, just ask and I'll do my best to answer. But hopefully that gives you sort of an idea of how to structure a deload and how to implement them. All right.